Hey, Chandler Bolt here. Welcome back. In this section, we're going to be talking about author appearances. Now, for many authors, their book becomes the key that unlocks this magical world that they didn't previously know existed. I like to say a book is kind of like this key that opens the door to Narnia, right? It's this magical world that only exists for published authors. It's all of these opportunities that you didn't previously know existed or that are now opened up to you because you have a book. Now, one of the big kind of pillars of that is what we call author appearances. Now, what are author appearances? Author appearances is when you're going in front of a large audience, or it's at least one to many, talking about your book. Now, the common types of author appearances are podcast interviews, media interviews, speaking gigs, or any other public appearance that seemed like not possible beforehand that you're now doing to talk about your book. Maybe you wanted to be on local TV, maybe you've wanted to be on podcasts, maybe you are a speaker or want to be a speaker. That is the power of a book, is unlocking all of these author appearances. So in this section, we're going to talk about why author appearances matter. We're going to talk about the 3 types of author appearances. How do you get booked for your first ones? How do you come up with a compelling hook? How do you make sure that it actually moves the needle, like that it sells books, it brings in business, and hopefully getting your first author appearances booked. Now that's my goal here, is that you follow these lessons and you book your first author appearance. Now, first off, let's talk about why author appearances matter. So author appearances, they give you credibility, they help you convert more people into paying customers, and it's also an evergreen marketing asset that exists for a really long time. All right, so let's break these down kind of one by one. So a book gets you in the door to then speak to a large group of people. Now, there's kind of your more vanity metric type stuff, which is getting on TV and all that stuff. And if you think about it, when people used to publish books, used to do it through a publishing deal. The goal is to get on the Today Show, to get on Good Morning America, all this stuff, right? What a lot of authors have found is that doesn't really move the needle. Now, I kind of bucket author appearances into 2 buckets. So there's the vanity bucket or the credibility bucket, and then there's the bucket that actually moves the needle in terms of book sales or business growth. Now, if you think about it, in the old days, the way that most people publish books, the way that most people launch books is they follow the traditional model, right? This is, you want to get on the big book tour, you want to do TV, you want to hopefully get on the Today Show, Good Morning America, whatever else. And what a lot of authors found is that those shows don't actually move the needle. Who's watching TV all day? Not exactly the same overlap as people who are buying books. And so I just want to be really clear on that. Maybe you want to do one or the other or both, but you kind of got to evaluate, what am I trying to do? And then as Stephen Covey would say, begin with the end in mind from there. So if you want to get on TV, great. Probably not going to move a bunch of books, but it can give you credibility in your market. Maybe you're using it in your marketing. Maybe you're using it for your business, right? Or maybe you just want to become a local celebrity for business purposes, or you just want to be the star of the high school reunion. Well, then use the book to get on local TV. It's very easy to do, and you can take over a market. And so later I'm going to walk you through kind of the different rungs of the ladder and all the different types of PR and all that stuff. But that's the first piece is, okay, if you want to get on TV, use it for credibility. They're not going to bring you on to talk about your business, but they will bring you on to talk about your book, right? If they're bringing you on to talk about your book and your book's about your business, well, then guess what? They're bringing you on to talk about your business. So maybe you're doing that bucket, or maybe you're looking to move a ton of books. So that is where podcasts come into play. All right. And now you can move books through any of these mediums, but podcasts are the conversion advantage. All right. If you think about it, who's the type of person that's buying books? Probably the type of person that's also feeding their mind in the form of podcasts, right? So I found that if you're looking for the ultimate conversion advantage, podcasts are that advantage, right? And Hal Elrod talked about this, his book, The Miracle Morning. I think he went on 100, 200, 300 podcasts in the first year, which is nuts. But he did that, and the book just started selling more and more and more. All right. And then the third advantage, and this is a big one for why to do author appearances, is you create evergreen assets, right? We always talk about kind of one-off efforts versus evergreen assets. Well, when you go on these shows, this is an asset, whether it's a podcast interview, whether it's a TV interview, and you repurpose that. This is an asset that's going to keep moving books. It's going to keep bringing people into your ecosystem long after you record it. So there you have it. Those are the whys behind author appearances. Now that we've got the why behind author appearances, let's go more in depth on the 3 specific types. All right. So the first one, as I mentioned, the most powerful is podcast interviews. All right, the benefits of this is it obviously converts a lot better, and also they're easier to get on at the start. All right. Now, secondly is media coverage. All right, so maybe you want to get on local TV, on the local radio, local newspaper, and you can kind of expand from there, right? Dream big and start small, but media coverage is a really great opportunity to build credibility, build local opportunities, and also to build assets that you can repurpose in your marketing. So the third one is my personal favorite, and that's speaking engagements. Now, I found this to be the best way long-term to move books. With podcast interviews, maybe you're recording them ahead of time with a launch. With media coverage, maybe you're recording ahead of time, or most likely you're doing it during launch week and launch month. So a lot of that stuff is batched either beforehand or early on in the life cycle of your book, but speaking engagements are the gift that keeps on giving. All right. And so I like to use books to get booked for speaking gigs. Okay. This is my favorite type of author appearance. Then you can build, there's a lot of fun things that you can do with this. You can build book sales into your speaking gigs, right? In the form of, hey, if you book me to speak, well, then I want you to include 100 books or 300 books or whatever the audience number is. Okay. So now all of a sudden you're moving a bunch of books and you're making money speaking. Or on the flip side, you can say, hey, I'm going to show up to speak and I'm going to bring books for sale. Or if your goal is to grow your business, well, then, you can show up, speak, bring books for free. That's what we do. And then you generate business from the speaking gig and from the books. So those are the three types. I want you to think about which one of these types do you want to focus on first, and maybe which one is the long-term strategy for you to move more books and bring in more business. The foundation for getting booked for more author appearances is a compelling hook. Now, this is something we always talk about, whether it's your title or whether it's the hook for your talk. A good hook needs to do a few things, right? It needs to grab attention, so maybe it's provocative, but it also needs to be clear. They need to instantly understand, in the case of your title, what the book's about and whether or not it's for them. But in the case of the hook, right, this needs to be something that's compelling for the decision maker that's going to book you. So we're going to talk about how do you even find the decision makers, whether it's podcast, media, all that stuff, and how do you reach out to them. But before you reach out to them, you need to be super clear on what you're going to be speaking about. All right, because this is how we make this not just a yes, but a hell yes for them to book you. All right. So the number one question that I'm asking before I reach out to anyone trying to book me for an author appearance is, how do I make them look good? So if you think about this, I want you to just put yourself in their shoes for a second. A podcast host, or maybe an editor at a TV station, right? Or maybe someone booking you to speak at their event. You need to think about, what do they care about? How do I make them look good? Right. And it's going to vary a little bit, but if I'm, a podcast host, I want great content that's going to help me grow my podcast, right? If I'm an event host, I want great content that the audience is going to love, and bonus points if you can help me sell more tickets to the event, or bonus points if you can help me make more money from the event, right? That's what I care about. If I'm a media person, well, what do I care about? I want a great story that my boss is going to say, hey, great job, right? So now all of a sudden we're starting with that in mind, right? So how do I make them look good? And again, we come back to the hook. We need a compelling hook that they're going to say yes to, that's going to be really great for their audience, right? Because they are serving their audience. That's their goal. Great content for their audience. I need to make sure that what I'm proposing is aligned with that. And I love kind of this analogy. Maybe you've heard of it. It's the analogy of the Chinese gooseberry. You heard of this? Right? Maybe you heard us talk about this when it comes to coming up with a good title for your book. So if you've never heard of the Chinese gooseberry, it's because it wasn't a good hook. Right? So there used to be this fruit. It was called the Chinese gooseberry, and it was kind of this odd looking fruit. And back when it was called this, it was in the middle of the Cold War and all this stuff. There's weird stuff going on. The fruit looks kind of weird. There's this weird connotation with China. There's all this stuff happening. And so it didn't sell. And then finally a farmer said, that looks like our national bird, the kiwi. And they renamed it the kiwi fruit. Now, have you heard of the kiwi fruit? Yeah. Probably. That's my favorite fruit. These suckers are delicious, right? But that's the power, right? What is in there didn't change, the hook did. Right? So if you think about that, whether it's your book or whether it's your title or the content for your author appearance, right? The content doesn't have to change, but the hook needs to, so that you make the person look good who's booking you on that podcast for that media at that event. All right, now that I've absolutely hammered that home and you're convinced that your hook matters, there's a couple key things that you need to do here. So I'll give a general principle, and then I'll give you some templates that you can maybe use or follow, right? So the general principle is, it needs to be compelling and clear, not clever, right? Just like your title of the book, it needs to be clear, not clever, because if it's clever and they're confused, They're not interested. And the other fundamental thing, and this is to make sure that your talk converts, is that your content is aligned with the topic of your book. All right, we'll talk about that later, kind of how to make sure that your talk converts and all that good stuff. But if your talk topic is not aligned with your business and or your book, and preferably all three of those things are very well aligned, well, then guess what? You might give a great talk, but it's not going to move the needle. It's not going to move books. So that's kind of how to start crafting a compelling hook. You may have already started crafting it in the title and subtitle of your book, right? But if you're looking for kind of some templates or some angles that we use, and this is especially good for local media or for media in general, is there's the feel good hook, right? So maybe 5% of news is that feel good story, right? Secondly, it's a timely hook. So this is where something right now is going on in the world. I can interject myself into that conversation and I can give my unique angle on that thing. And that's a really good one that you'd be surprised at how many different ways that you can do it. All right. Thirdly is the new, right? So there's a new fad. Your book is about it, right? Maybe it's a new thing like AI and you're talking about it. Maybe it's a new developing thing in the news. So it's timely or it's new. Those are really good hooks. And then lastly is controversial. All right. And controversial hooks are controversial, so some of you may want to stay away from that, but I'll tell you, it does get shared and it does get noticed. All right, so if you reach out with something that's controversial, it's likely going to get noticed. All right, and then there's other kind of proven tropes, and as you start to see this, you'll see this in the news. There's the hometown person makes good. All right, so any way that you can find to fit this into a hook that they're already talking about or an angle that they're already using, but specific to your book, you're more likely to get booked for that media appearance, for that podcast, or at that event. So there you have it. That's how you come up with a hook that gets yeses from decision makers. Next up, let's talk about your fastest path to your first yes. I remember when I first discovered this method, I was running a house painting business. So I was working for a company called Student Painters. It's an internship where they teach you how to run a business by running a house painting business and painting houses. So one of the things that they teach you is you're going door to door, knocking on doors. All right. And I remember one day, sometimes desperation leads to the best innovation. I remember one day I'm just knocking on doors. And I think to myself, there's got to be a better way. I'm going one-to-one with my outreach. And what I'd love to do instead is go one-to-many. And so I asked myself, what if there was one way to get into all of the homes of all these doors that I'm knocking on? Right. And I thought, and I said, well, hold up, that's called the newspaper. And normally when I was walking by their mailbox, there was a newspaper in there. I said, okay, hold up. What if I just instead spend a few hours getting in the newspaper? Then that newspaper gets in front of 30,000, 50,000, 100,000 people. Well, that'd probably be more leverage, right? And so that's where this method was born. When it comes to getting your first yeses, it starts with what I call the rungs of the ladder. All right. So there's A-level opportunities, there's B-level opportunities, and there's C-level opportunities. This is where most people mess up. You've got the A-level opportunities. These are the dream opportunities that everyone wants. Most people start there. It's the Today Show. It's Good Morning America. It's this massive national outlet. Then you've got the B-level opportunities. These are more regional stuff. So this might be your regional newspaper, your regional podcast, or kind of mid-sized podcasts, right? And then there's C-level. This is local stages. This is maybe small podcasts. This is local TV, radio, newspaper, all that stuff. So what I recommend here when it comes to these rungs of the ladder is start at the highest point of the ladder that you can get your easiest yes, right? So maybe that's C-level. And for most people, that's C-level opportunities. Great. I'm trying to get my fastest yes so then I can use that yes and leverage that yes to get a bigger yes and a bigger yes and a bigger yes, right? So it starts with the rungs of the ladder. You maybe work with those C-level opportunities, then rung up to the B level, then rung up to the A level, hopefully at some point. How do you even find those though? And how do you get to them? Well, this is where the 3 R's come in. So I call this the 3 R's. It's research, referrals, and reach outs. So for most people, there's the basic research, which is, all right, C-level, let's call it podcasts, media, etc. I'm looking for all of the local TV shows, right? I'm looking for all of the local newspapers, local radio, and maybe for podcasts, I'm looking for small podcasts or people that I know that have been on podcasts, right? Or that have a podcast. So that's the research phrase. So if we're going back into the Student Painters example, what I did is I said, hey, I'm in Summerville, South Carolina. let me look at the local TV station. So I got a list now. And so then I can move into either referrals or reach outs. So referrals, this is going to come through what I call your advocates. These are people who know someone in those worlds. The easiest way to get a first yes is to know someone who knows someone. So maybe your homework from this video could be, hey, post and say, does anyone know someone who has podcasts? Does anyone know someone who's been on a podcast? Does anyone know someone who works at one of these TV stations, one of these newspapers, whatever, right? So you're kind of trying to shake the trees to find your advocates, which are going to give you your introductions or your referrals. And then there's the third piece, which is the reach outs. Now we've got a bunch of templates around this. There's email templates and all that stuff. But remember, you can simplify all this to just say, reach out directly to the decision maker with a compelling hook that's compelling for them and with a reason why it's a win for them. So those are the 3 R's: research, then find referrals. If you can, then reach out directly to the decision makers. So now that you've started your reach outs, it's time to follow up. Maybe you've heard the saying, the fortune is in the follow-up. I agree, because what's going to happen is you're going to do all this reach outs and you're lucky if you get a 5 or 10% response rate. Now, I know that might be a little bit demoralizing, but it's more often than not. In fact, it's far more often than not that you're going to get no response. So what do? Do you just give up? You reach out once, that's it? No, of course not. This is exactly like we talk about with getting reviews. Keep following up, keep following up, keep following up. So the basic system here that I recommend, and this is really the bare minimum, is what I call the 3-7-7 follow-up system. This is, again, bare minimum, but you've got your initial outreach. Then if they don't respond for 3 days, follow up 3 days later, right? Then if they don't follow up 7 days later, and then 7 days after that. Now, again, this is the bare minimum, but you need to reach out in a couple specific ways. So number one, it needs to be compelling and it needs to be different. We've all seen those, and it doesn't work. We're just like, hey, just checking in per my previous email, right? So have you seen the above? Make it interesting. Hey, I saw that you posted about blah, blah, blah. That's so interesting. Hey, I saw that you had a new story. Oh, I saw that you actually had XYZ guest. Here's why I think that relates to what I'm doing and why this would be a great fit for me to be on your show. And this is going to make you look good. So unique follow-up, very important. The second thing that I like to do here is go where they're at. So some people, they never respond to email, but they might respond to a LinkedIn request, right? They might respond to a Facebook message. They might respond to a text if you have their phone number, or they might respond to, and I've literally done this, again, back in the student painters example, my second year that I came back, I trained a whole team to use this blueprint because it worked so well. When I did it, I got in the local newspaper, I got in the local TV show, I got all this stuff. I even got a proclamation from the mayor, and then they said, hey, we got to train this to the whole company. So I came back, I trained my guys, and they're working through this process. And I remember they said, hey, yeah, I'm just not getting a response from this newspaper. Then we're out in the field driving from paint job to paint job. I saw that we passed the newspaper that they have been reaching out to with no response. I said, pull the car over. He's like, what? What are you talking about? I'm like, yeah. Pull the car over, turn it around, we're going in. And we did. We went in, we said, hey, we're here to talk with so-and-so, very assumptively. All right, we didn't say we had a meeting with so-and-so. We said, we're here to talk with so-and-so. They led us straight back to him. He said, oh, wow, I forgot to respond to your email. My fault. Do you want to do the interview right now? We did the interview on the spot. It printed in the paper a week or two later, right? We've done the same thing with local TV stations and all that. A lot of times they have a physical presence, go there, right? And maybe that is one of the ways that they prefer to be contacted. And then the third follow-up technique, and this is a reach out technique as well, is reach out to everyone, even if they're not relevant. So when I was reaching out to a TV station, well, there's probably 1 or 2 people that are the decision maker to get me on that show. But I reached out to everyone in the station individually. Guess what? Because do you think the weatherman gets hit up that often? Do you think the sports guy gets hit up that often? Probably not. All right. But when I reach out to them, they say, oh, hey, so sorry, I'm actually not the right person for this, but I just forwarded it to the person who is. Meet so-and-so. Right. And that's almost like getting a warm introduction or a warm referral from someone inside the station or inside whatever that place is, right? And so now all of a sudden, it's a good follow-up technique and it's a good outreach technique to get more yeses. So we got the rungs of the ladder, we got the 3 R's, so your research, your referrals, your reach outs, and then you need to follow up. The fortune is in the follow-up, And if you use this strategy and you use these techniques, you will get your first yes. Congratulations, you did it. You got your first yes. All right. So if you've implemented up to this point, you've hopefully gotten your first yes. You said yes to a podcast interview. You've said yes to a TV appearance, whatever else. Now we want to talk about kind of the prep of how to make sure that you do well, but more importantly, the call to action. Be yourself, be confident, speak on the stuff that you already wrote the book about. Right? We talked about lining the hook with this. You're in your comfort zone. This is your genius zone. You wrote a book about this, right? Don't overthink it. Speak on your core competency and make sure that you're compelling, that you're engaging, and that it's a fit and resonates with their audience. Now, I'm going to make a big assumption here and assume that, hey, you're at least decent at that. We've got other training about how to level up your talks and how to give a good talk and all that stuff. But let's assume that you're at least decent at that. Now, this is where most people blow it. It's with the call to action, or CTA. So call to action. So any good talk, this is whether it is a media appearance, podcast interview, right, or on a stage, has to have a call to action. Because here's the thing, if you want them to do something, right, maybe it's buy your book, maybe it's give you their contact info, maybe it's do business with you, you need to tell them specifically what the thing is for them to do. So there's a couple mistakes that people make here. Number one, their call to action isn't clear. Number two, they do multiple calls to action, or they might ask you that at the end of the TV interview or at the end of your talk. You've got kind of your closing call to action, your closing statement. So I want to begin with the end in mind and say, what's the next step that most people should take? So there's one of two things. Like I mentioned, number one, it's buying your book. Go buy my book. It's out this week. Here's maybe a bonus for you. Go to a specific URL. So when I'm on a lot of podcasts, I might say, hey, you're listening to this podcast. You probably like audio content. Well, my book published is on audiobook. I'd love to gift it to you for free. Go to publishedbook.com/audio, right? So now I've made a compelling offer and a very clear ask, right? Now, maybe I'm on a podcast and saying, hey, how can people do business with you? Well, I'll say, well, go to selfpublishing.com/apply, book a call with my team. And on that call, we'll talk about your goals for your book, your challenges with your book, and how we can help. Right, so now I've just had a very clear and compelling call to action so they know exactly what to do next to work with me. And I'll kind of close with this on this point. So when I was in Student Painters, kind of dropping back into that example, I was thinking about this and I said, hey, they're putting me in the newspaper. This is one of those weird mediums where they're probably not going to allow me to call to action. Right? And so what I thought about is I said, hey, how could I get my call to action into the newspaper? Where they needed a picture for the story. And so I said, what if we do this? Let's take a picture in front of the house. A big part of our business is we're putting these lawn signs out everywhere. What if I just take a picture with one of the lawn signs? Well, guess what's on the lawn sign? The phone number to call to work with us. Right? So now all of a sudden, when we got this big story in the newspaper, it's a big old picture of me with this lawn sign. The phone number is right there. So sometimes you got to get a little clever with it, get a little strategic with it so that you make sure your call to action gets put in the piece. Because again, no call to action, no action means they're not buying the book likely, or they're not doing business with you. Now, this last piece is maximizing the impact of your author appearances. And there's 3 ways to do this. Okay, first things first, it's turning yeses into more yeses. So you got the yes, you did the talk, you had a good CTA, you brought the house down, people loved it. There's 2 things right after this that you can turn one yes into a bunch of yeses. The first thing is referrals. So if you're trying to get more of whatever you're on a podcast, you're trying to get more podcasts. At the end, after the recording's over, with the host, you say, hey, this was awesome. I love this. Was that what you're looking for? Okay, awesome. Hey, quick question for you. Do you know anyone else that has a podcast that might want to have me on? Pause, right? And you can ask this question the wrong way, and this is the way a lot of people do it. They say, hey, if you know anyone that might want to have me on their podcast, let me know. Anyways, thanks, see ya, right? It's that one small little difference is the difference between getting more referrals and not, right? So you ask for more referrals, that's an easy one, but then there's also asking for the renewal. So referrals and renewals. And so this is especially speaking gigs, maybe less so on podcasts and media appearances. Maybe a media appearance, they want to have you come back as a regular contributor. That's great. That's a good win, right? But more so on speaking gigs, you might say, hey, you doing this conference again next year? I'd love to come back and speak. All right, so that's the first thing, turn yeses into more yeses. Second thing is content repurposing. So this is where you can clip up and chop up, or even just take kind of the raw talk and then say, hey, I'm going to use this elsewhere in my marketing, right? So you might have this media clip. Okay, awesome. I'm going to repurpose that. I'm going to post that on social, right? I am going to use that in a bunch of other ways. Like I'm going to market that and use that as part of the marketing for my book and for my business. And then the third and final strategy is social proof to get more yeses. Now, this is a big one. Your first yes is the hardest. Your first few yeses are the hardest because who are you? Right? Who are you to get on all this stuff? So what I like to do is once I've got some yeses, I will then now use that in my outreach, right? So when I'm reaching out to maybe a podcast, I'd say, hey, you may have seen I've been on these other podcasts. They loved it. I think it'd be a great fit for your show. When I'm reaching out to media, right? You may have seen I've been on this TV station, this TV station. Maybe you drip in their competitors and maybe they're competitive and they want to have you on, or maybe that's not a good thing, right? So kind of figure out what the angle is, work that angle. And then, hey, maybe I'm speaking gigs. They don't know. Have you spoke before? Are you even a speaker? Now, yes, a book is going to open the door. But if we want to grease the wheels of that more, I'd say, oh yeah, I've spoken at a bunch of these events with people like this. People love to talk. I'd love to be at your event. So that's the third piece, is use those yeses for social proof to get more author appearances booked. So there you have it. That's our author appearance playbook. We talked about why they're important. We talked about your outreach strategy, right? We talked about the type of author appearances. We talked about CTAs. We talked about how to make sure that you convert when you get that opportunity. We talked about how to get people to say yes. Here's the homework that I want you to do right now. Okay, so there's 4 very specific next steps I want you to take. Number 1, I want you to start creating hook examples for your author appearance. Okay, and specifically, I want you to create 5 hook examples. All right, so you're going to get some ideas flowing. Maybe one will jump out at you, but create 5 hook examples. Then secondly, I want you to create 2 calls to action. So when you get on those appearances, what's your call to action going to be? This should be pretty straightforward, right? Buy your book, do business with you, but what's something interesting and compelling in line with that that's going to lead people to the action that you want them to take? And then thirdly, and this is quite frankly the most important step, is I want you to reach out to 10 people, at least 10 people who have the ability to book you for an author appearance. And because our goal is to get as many no's as fast as possible, because if you do this, you will get a yes. All right, now you might have to keep following up. You might have to go for a few more no's. I've got a friend that has this strategy, or this saying is go for no. He said, your goal is to get 3 no's a day. And I can make you this promise right now. If you, for the next 10 days, reach out to 3 people a day and at least get 3 no's a day, you're going to get a yes. You will get booked for your first author appearance. And then the 4th and final step, if you like this video, go ahead and click the like button, subscribe, comment below. Let me know what was the biggest takeaway. I know this was a meaty one. We went in depth on author appearances. So what was your biggest takeaway? What was most helpful? Comment below, and I'll see you in the next video.